Oh, BMX Bandits. Look, I really appreciate the love you guys gave to BMX Bandits. You thought it through. You were sort of in my head as I was lining up shots and developing a tone. So that was good.
Let's talk about it. What has happened, everybody? This is Wrong Reel episode 583. It's a podcast for hardcore cinephiles where we tackle everything from Jean-Luc Godard to Jean-Luc Picard. And today is a very special day because Paul Murphy and I are going to be speaking with a filmmaker who is a key figure in the golden age of Australian genre cinema, the director behind films like The Man from Hong Kong, Death Cheaters, Stunt Rock, Turkey Shoot, BMX Bandits, Dead End Drive-In, Danger Freaks, The Siege of Firebase Gloria, and many, many more. Talking about the great Brian Trenchard-Smith. So just thank you in advance for doing this. It's a huge honor for me and Paul to get a chance to talk to you about your work, especially since you seem to have so many stokes in the fire and so many things that you're working on. So welcome to Wrong Reel.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and to be in front of two such erudite and amusing hosts. I'll stop sort of and you'll get on with the questions.
Well, it's a huge thrill because I first saw Not Quite Hollywood probably about 10, 11 years ago, and that's how I first discovered your work. And then I saw The Man from Hong Kong at the which theater is it here in New York? The Metrograph. And from there, started slowly but surely picking off your films, and recently watched a bunch, and Paul has been as well. So I think maybe the best place to start is you have a Blu-ray release on the horizon for Death Cheaters. So I think we should just start there for the unconverted, for people out there who are just unaware of who this unkillable man might be. Who is Grant Page? How did you start working together, and how did you conceive of giving him his first starring role in this film, Death Cheaters?
Well, Grant Page basically is a unique talent, and every now and again in your career you bump into unique talent. Well, I thought Nicole Kidman, when she auditioned at 15 for BMX Bandits, was unique talent. But Grant was extraordinary. I was making my first independent film. I just left the safe executive suite at TCN Channel 9 Sydney, where I was a special projects producer, and I sort of ran the 4 stations, promos. And I wanted to make my own films, as I had since a child. And I managed to persuade someone to give me $16,000. And how will I get my money back? Well, the action sells all over the world. This is an action documentary. Shoot it in 16mm color, because Australia was a black and white television nation at that time. And I'll be able to sell it internationally. And it'll be about, it'll have a number of movie stunt sequences that we'll actually stage, as opposed to buying clips, as some of shows have done in the past, like Chuck Connor's, Thrill Seekers, etc. And we'll then show how the stuntmen themselves did the stunt. And for my commando sequence, I need someone who can do abseiling off a 90-foot cliff. The lead stuntman that I had, was basing, who was going to be the chief coordinator. He said, well, the man you need is Grant Page. He lives in South Australia. Fly him up for a couple of days. We'll prep and we'll do it. Grant suggested another stunt, the tandem rope slide. And both those stunts feature in the first 10 minutes of The Stuntmen, which includes a death-defying 90-foot fall by Bob Woodham, who introduced me to Grant Page. Well, I had hoped that The Stuntmen would lead to a series. Bob Woodham died, about 6 months after we shot The Stuntmen. He went in for open heart surgery, and he died after the operation. That was a tragedy. 33 years old, he could have had a great career. But I then turned to Grant and said, okay, I still want to make a series about stuntmen and how they do their stunts. So I've created this thing called Danger Freaks. Would you please headline it? I'm going to become your manager and get you work in other areas of the business. And I'm going to create vehicles to show off your skills, because your skills are unique. So I therefore built him into the Man from Hong Kong. I created Kung Fu Killers. Who will succeed Bruce Lee? Grant Page goes to Hong Kong to find out. And various other bits and pieces. I mean, we set him on fire a number of times in Hospitals Don't Burn Down, Australia's most successful industrial film ever.
You set yourself on fire once as well, if memory serves.
Yes, about 5 times. Well, it was generally as publicity stunts, as the hottest director in town. I was off to the Johnny Carson show in 1975 with that gimmick that he would say, I want to introduce you to the hottest director in town. The curtains would draw and I'd be on fire and step out and shake his hand. As soon as Business Affairs and Legal Affairs at NBC got hold of that idea, that was absolutely not. So that didn't happen. So I think Grant has basically done that to poor Geoffrey Rush at some point, I think, in some public appearance, and offered him his hand while he's on fire. I believe there's a clip of that somewhere. Anyway, so I just knew Grant was great talent, and he was liking us a new Errol Flynn, a man who had sort of great raw masculine charisma and could had the expertise to pull off great stunts. And to devise them. He introduced me to the concept of hang gliding, which we made a good use of in Man from Hong Kong, which was the first dramatic motion picture to have utilized it. And Skyriders was the second. So because Grant told me about this amazing thing that I could go down to Stanwell Park with him and watch, and I thought, okay, I'll build that into a movie, and so on. So he had the wonderful vehicle that is in Death Cheaters, which is called, he built himself, called Buttercup, and could do 100K in forward and reverse, and all sorts of things. So we created that for Danger Freaks, and we used it in Death Cheaters. Anyway, that's just a small potted history of the beginning of Grant's career. I managed him for 5 years. He was then up and away, and Stunt Rock was a vehicle specifically created, not just to be a good sort of fun kids drive-in holiday movie. It was also to launch him on the international stunt market, and that has just been released on Blu-ray in Australia and is region free. So,
and in your own words, much stunt and much rock take place.
Yeah, well, I'm short and to the point, shall we say? You wouldn't get it from this interview, so that was Stunt Rock, and now you mentioned Death Cheaters. That's coming up in February. And a talented bunch of Australian comic strip artists, led by Darren Koziel, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's an enterprising lad. Anyway, he came up with the idea of doing a comic version of Stunt Rock and a comic version of Death Cheaters, which he will put out in print and sell through comic book conventions. But a disc 2 of these films will contain his comic strip that you can zip through. And the recent re-release of Man from Hong Kong contains stereo tracks of Noel Quinlan's music score, which was a great benefit to the film. I'm sure you would agree.
Paul, I feel like I'm hogging our guest. Do you have any questions about?
I'm hogging the screen and the mic entirely, but carry on. You'll get a word in occasionally.
I'm just interested that it kind of feels like, early directors always have their actor, Scorsese had De Niro. Would you consider Grant Page like your your De Niro early on. You did so
Yeah,
many films together.
I should have thought of it that way. Yeah, that's a very nice comparison. I thought, wow, this guy's got something, and he is just what I need. And we worked well together. We bonded. He could do all sorts of things that I couldn't do, or that I was scared to do. And frankly, you should be scared to do most of the things that he does. But he will show you how they can be done to make it be totally safe but look dangerous.
So calm and so unemotional about everything, and how in all you've made so many movies that are great love letters to just the art and the techniques of stunts. But it's so fascinating hearing his own words about how something's gone wrong if it gets emotional. Like, he can walk along a cliff the same way we could walk along a line drawn on the floor. Emotionally, he's in the same place. And it's fascinating seeing you kind of unlock the mentality that it requires to successfully engineer all these stunts.
He practiced it on me on one particular occasion. I've always been afraid of heights. And he said, well, you can get over that. I once had to carry a wounded commando who had got injured in the abseiling off North Head, lash his hands together, hook him over my back of my neck, and take him up the zigzag fisherman's walk all the way up to the top of North Head in that injured condition. So that was difficult, but I could do it. Now, you could, if you just obey all the rules, walk down that same fisherman's walk, which is ledges no more than 12 inches wide. And you just don't think about the drop. And you'll do what I say, put your left hand there, put your right hand there, put your left foot there. Now, always keep 3 points of contact with the face at all times, and then you'll always be able to have your balance. And he talked me down 300 feet of North Head. Admittedly, I was white as a sheet and needed a change of underwear, but I was, the fact is, what he said was that if you have to do something, you can do it. So, he was a good friend, and I trusted him, and it all worked out well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, would we?
Exactly. Well, in Death Cheaters, I love how the original name was Stunt. I was almost mispronounced it. Cunning Stunts, and the fear was that people might.
You wouldn't want an accidental spoonerism, would you?
Yeah, and I'm gonna get demonetized off YouTube. But do any sweatshirts or T-shirts exist from that scene where the two characters, Steve and Rodney, are got their I almost mispronounced it again, their cunning stunts gear on?
Well, I'm sure there were probably about 20 made, but I suspect, having been through the laundry for that many years, not many of them have survived. And I, for some reason, haven't had one for very many years. So
you got to bring them back.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it was the initial trading name that Grant had in mind for his stunt company, or for his, the umbrella for his stunt services. And when we talked about that, as to, obviously he had to sort of take care of his money, I thought it would be a great title for a film. And the initial treatment that I wrote, and I handed it over to a really good screenwriter, Michael Cove. It was titled Cunning Stunts, but my financier was worried about the accidental spoonerism. Well, and while I was saying, oh no, nobody will do that, and I would raved on about this and that, and then I tried to come back to the subject again, and then I found myself that no one will say stunning, and then there you go. So the title had to be changed, and Death Cheaters is a perfectly good substitute.
Yes, sir.
By the time you're making Death Cheaters, it's pretty clear that you're a director who is like fascinated and almost obsessed with stunts in film. What do you think it was about stunts that were drawing you? Was it just like the value of capturing something like that on tape, or what was it that you kept coming back to this?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of us filmmakers are influenced by the films that took us by storm as children. I think Spielberg has said that. And obviously, he was influenced by a lot of sci-fi B movies as well as A movies when he was growing up, and I want to make those. And sure enough, he did. But he naturally also wanted to make other. He was an omnivore, just as I am in cinema, and we all want to make the films that we loved as a child. I wish I could have made Gladiator, because after seeing Revolt of the Slaves and Spartacus, or Revolt of the Slaves was kind of a cheap sort of peplum, spaghetti Spartacus, but I love the color and the vibrancy and the energy of those epics. Always wanted to make one, and I was busy writing a Gladiator picture when Gladiator was announced. So forget it. Okay, put that aside. I will never make my great Gladiator movie. Anyway, but so therefore I've always been drawn to action. It's a visual medium, and I've enjoyed spectacle. I enjoyed action that reinforces the drama, and naturally I've made a study of how action can be made more impactful by where you put the camera, how you edit it, how you score it, and soundtrack it, etc. So I therefore wanted to practice that. So The Stuntmen, as a sort of mock documentary about stuntmen, was a way in which everyone could wear their own clothes and didn't need, well, we got some costuming for the Western sequences and the commando sequences, but we're for 16 grand all up to get to a 16 millimeter answer print. It's certainly value for money, because everyone, no one was paid more than $200 a week, and some people are only paid $50 a day.
That's what's remarkable, is you got such an extraordinary action for so little cost on film after film after film, whereas you always hear, once any action film, the budget starts soaring into the stratosphere. But like, just getting back to Death Cheaters, we were talking about this on our video about BMX Bandits, about how you would set up the camera on the bike as a rig and create these incredibly immersive shots. And once again, you do that here with Death Cheaters, with that homemade vehicle of Grant Page's. There's one sequence where John Hargreaves is on the back of the vehicle, and they're jumping over these sand dunes and going down these cliffs. And even though I was just watching it on an iPad, I was getting vertigo from those POV shots. Yes. They're incredibly immersive. So maybe if you could just talk to us a bit about your philosophy about how getting extraordinary punch for your action scenes, but at minimal cost.
Well, I'm a great believer in putting the audience at the point of impact, or potential point of impact. I slam a fist into the lens. I missed the lens. I punched my, yes, you see, I don't know where your lens is. That's better. I did that, and I got Wang Yu to punch, actually, our Hong Kong executive producer, Andre Morgan, who was doubling as one of the bad guys, and did his own backfall into boxes. Hey, there's an executive producer. Not too many people do that anymore in the executive producer ranks. But anyway, I like, it was impactful to go whap like that into the lens and CinemaScope. So these are things that I picked up along the way, and similarly rig shots where suddenly you make the audience travel at the speed of the vehicle. Obviously, Cinerama did that very effectively on a huge screen that embraced your entire field of vision. And certainly if you were in the middle of the stalls where the 3 Cinerama projector beams intersected to make a giant 3-panel screen that was sort of fuzzily fused, that was amazing. When you went down that roller coaster, people were really going like that, feeling like they were. So and occasionally you can get, even though we were aware of the proscenium arch and the cinema emergency lights, you can still get that kind of visceral reaction from an audience that then loses itself in the action scene. If you put the material together in a skillful way that engages their emotions and gives them eye-popping visuals. And in other words, put the audience's eyeballs where normally they couldn't possibly be, and have them experience what is in front of them and what is coming up. So that I've always been attracted to low wide angles. I've always been attracted. I've always been attracted to camera movement that opens up the geography of the place, but ties it into what's going on in the scene. So if there's you have a good dramatic reason to have somebody who's been talking from the kitchen sink back towards another character, and the camera is, let's say, over the character's shoulder, then the character of the sink turns and walks past the camera, and the camera pans and then opens up this whole vista behind me. The kitchen's over there, and then pursues the character, and followed by the person she was talking to. Naturally, my wife stars in this shot. And then suddenly you're looking at their conversation with this whole new background, and the scene is still flowing by dialogue, and that's better than 2 people just standing together exchanging close-ups. So these are the things, by watching the masters at work from the 30s onwards, that I sort of picked up. I didn't become a master, but it's awful fun trying, let's say.
I think that's also what makes you like one of the most significant Australian directors, even though you're not born in Australia and you spent, a period of your time there. But I feel like you've captured Australia almost better than a lot of other directors have with higher budgets. You look at, Sydney in Death Cheaters and things like that. Like, it just looks amazing. And even in Man from Hong Kong, where I'm seeing like old Oxford Street and old Paddington alleys and things like that, I don't think Australia's ever been quite captured as interestingly as you do on your lens there.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I actually thought that I should actually have been, made Minister for Tourism after BMX Bandits.
Especially after BMX Bandits.
Yes, I think so, because it was originally written for the Melbourne docks.
No.
Gee, how bright is that? So what about the northern beaches, Manly and the northern beaches of Sydney? And think of all those bright blue skies and the surf and the harbour. This is what tourists come to Australia for. So let's stuff it full of tourist picture postcards as backdrops to the kids' fun and games. And
in some way, Death Cheaters was like a dress rehearsal for BMX Bandits as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of did the same already, with Man from Hong Kong, insofar as when there was, I chose to do the opening sequence at Ayers Rock, or as it was called then. It's called Uluru appropriately now. But I thought, what is the most unlikely place in Australia for a Hong Kong drug dealer to deliver his shipment?
Sammo Hung, living legend.
Yes, Sammo Hung, great guy. So obviously sometimes the most unlikely appeals to my somewhat sort of warped and twisted mind. But then when you combine that with what is the most spectacular backdrop that this unlikely drug exchange could take place in? And well, naturally, Uluru sprang immediately to mind, and the world audience had not seen much of the red centre of Australia. Gee, I'd love to do, maybe a genuine historical piece that uses the Olgas and yes. Other great sort of primeval landscapes but you mentioned, of course I'm actually half British, I'm actually half British, half Irish, and half Australian. You can do that if you're Irish, me that. Anyway, and I've made 2 Leprechaun movies to prove it.
There you go.
I rewatched number 3 in preparation for this. So. Yeah.
Oh well, yes. Some people prefer it to 4. It's probably better comedy, but there are some splendidly wacky moments in 4 that I'm glad that I got to make. But to my point that the Trenchard-Smiths have been in Australia since the 1850s, and like the careless Protestants that they were, they bred lots of little Trenchard-Smiths, and then eventually my father reversed the process, so to speak. He in 1930 left Australia to join the Royal Air Force and remained there for 25 years, and I was the result after World War II. And then when I was 20, I did exactly what he did, though for different reasons. He left Australia to get away from his dominating father and to have some adventure and not be stuck in an accountancy firm as an articled clerk. He wanted to fly, and he did, and he became a very good pilot. And they kept him on. They gave him a full commission. He stayed 25 years, and I write of his adventures in my book, and it probably is time for a shameless plug.
Absolutely, shameless plug time.
And really,
and it's interesting in that chapter about your father, you suddenly, as a viewer, you suddenly think about your films and you go, oh, this all makes sense now. Like, it's not just random, some of the projects that you picked up, Turkey Shoot isn't random, right? No,
Turkey Shoot isn't random. My father was a prisoner of war for 4 years, and he dug for the Great Escape. He was number 90 something on the lottery to the order to get out, and there were 20 people ahead of him in this incredibly cramped tunnel. You have no idea how small those things were. And he was my size, but obviously not as well fed in World War II. But then they heard gunfire, and everyone just had to slowly back out of that long tunnel, and they were all duly punished. He participated in the Warburg Wire job in Poland, where they fused the camp generator with a razor blade across the terminals, killed the lights, and had made ladders and planks from the bed bunks, and ran out in the darkness on a moonlit night and put a ladder up one side, put planks across the middle to the other wire, and 12 people got out that way. But my father fell off the plank between the wires while the Germans were letting off a great deal of ammunition, but nobody was hurt except a German sentry who was shot in the leg. But my father did 30 days in the cooler on bread and water. So he commanded a base in Libya after the war, and I was there when I was 2 till 5. And then he was not to my knowledge, as seconded to MI6, where he facilitated in the staff that planned spy flights over Eastern Europe, leaflet drops, and parachuted people in and so forth. And his Air Force career ended doing that. We just thought he was taking a desk job in the Air Ministry, caught the train every morning, came back in the evening. But nearly 2 months before he died, he said, "Well, I suppose I can tell you this now. I signed the Official Secrets Act, but well, the Cold War's over, so what the hell?" And that's what he told me. He would have might have gone to his grave never mentioning that. So I have contacted the Air Ministry to get a hold of his records, and if I can go to England next year, I will have personal access to the things that they still keep confidential, and particularly his debriefing of his experiences as prisoner of war and his participation in escapes, and also his service in Libya, which was, we lived in interesting times, and so forth. So anyway, the whole book could be written about my father, and for that matter, about my
I almost
mother.
feel like a documentary directed by Brian Trenchard-Smith is just screaming your name.
Well, I mean, it has been put to me that there is a documentary in Adventures in the B-movie trade.
Hell yeah.
But I'm kind of, I think it should be made with an irreverent tone. I deserve an irreverent tone. I think Mark Hartley would probably do a good job, because after all, he's favored my work with the spotlight. But who knows? We'll see. I have a lot of 8mm footage of the 60s. There's a wealth of material that people haven't seen that could be welded into a documentary.
And I hope it's better stored than Grant's own archival material that all got lost a few years ago, didn't it?
Well, there was a flood on the northern rivers, and it washed away everything that he had. I've given copies of all my films that I have on Digibeta to the National Film and Sound Archive for safekeeping, or to have forever, but I just will have access to them when I need it. And and I'm quite sure people can go and request screenings or look at what I've given them. But certainly, my feeling about the book is that obviously it's kind of a vanity piece, but it is also a portrait of an era that has now over, and we will never see its like again, or we'll never see those opportunities again. And I feel for young filmmakers who have as much or more talent than I had when I was 20. And scratched around in the UK and got a couple of cutting room floor sweeping jobs, and I was the worst clapper loader that Reflex Films ever hired, they told me, because I read the entire slate the first time that I as the clapper loader marked it. I thought, well, they wrote this down on this board for some reason, I guess, and we're meant to identify what the scene is, so they better have all the other information as well, as to who's shooting, what day it is, etc. Well, when you're doing documentary material, you don't really have to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to be keen,
Look, as an editor, I do appreciate the effort.
Be keen, and you may be noticed, and someone may give you a shot, which is basically what happened to me. I went and pitched, with all the arrogance of youth at the age of 21, a cheap program to the special projects executive at Channel 9, and he said, "No, but I see you've done promos. Would you like to just do a couple of months with us. We have an overload on this upcoming Christmas. So I said, sure. And then they were so pleased, they asked me to stay on. So I duly did. And but I took, I took 18 months off later to learn how to make movie trailers by going to England and making them for an American company. And I came back, and they flew me back to make promos. And I said, this time, I'll come back, but you have to give me programs to make. And that particular executive, Pat Condon, who started Pat Condon Attractions, Pat Condon Enterprises, he brought lots of great, musical shows and musical acts to Australia over the years. Anyway, he was that executive, and he duly gave me little things to make, and that's how I sort of really properly learned the trade of production. And I was lucky that when you write your first script, I'd written a few before, but when you seriously are pitching a script, I was very lucky that the timing was right. It was just what people wanted to make, and that was The Man from Hong Kong. My TV documentaries at all, at least they've been proof that I could deliver action. So then I got my chance to deliver it on the big screen, and luckily that worked. So, but I think that I had a lot of opportunities. Yeah, I think it still works, and you see it with today's audience, and they get off on it. Sure, it maybe doesn't have the. It's not quite Jackie Chan. It's not Bruce Lee. It's Jimmy Wong Yu's particular kind of street fighting, which in a way doesn't date.
But it's got Roger Ward, and it's got George Lazenby, and the cast. It's got you getting your back stomped.
When you said to me, "Is Grant Page your Roger Ward?" Is Grant Page your Robert De Niro? Yeah, that's good. But Roger Ward has also been, is a unique personality that is quintessentially Australian. And, I wanted him, and that personality in my movies, obviously playing, somewhat over the top characters. And he is the most wonderful guard from hell in Turkey Shoot. I mean, no one could do it better. Well, and Quentin Tarantino thinks so too. He will.
I love that anecdote in your book when you're at the Sydney premiere of Kill Bill Volume 1, and Tarantino starts quoting Turkey Shoot back to you, and it was just so heartwarming seeing the two of you side by side in the documentary, just developing this incredible rapport. And anyway, I always like hearing which filmmakers get inspired by which filmmakers, and I feel like that's the highest form of praise when your peers have love and admiration for your work. So I imagine that had to be particularly gratifying to you.
It was particularly gratifying. In fact, we had that conversation had taken place relating to him quoting Turkey Shoot in 1999. We met at the premiere of Norma Jean and Marilyn when he was.
That's right.
Mira Sorvino. But we've had many conversations since, and I've been to his house a few times, not recently, because I'm up in Oregon.
I guess it was the Sydney premiere where you told the critics, if you don't like Brian Trenchard-Smith, you're not going to like this movie. And they were like, oh, and they all kind of got, they kind of shifted awkwardly in their seats.
I understand the local literati were there, and there were probably quite a few people wondering whether that person was going to be the one he nominated to dedicate Kill Bill Volume 1 to. And then when my name came up, there was a sort of an audible ripple, should we say? It's like breathing stopped collectively for about a second, but then he issued his comment, which he capped with a suggestion that they could go elsewhere, but one that will not pass YouTube. So I will Anyway, he did actually say that. So that was nice of him. Look, I really appreciate Quentin's a champion of the underdog. And you see that socially speaking in his films, and you know his big human liberal heart is self-evident. But he's also a great cinema analyst and cinema historian, and he's not a snob. In fact, he said to me, "I like to stick a lighted weed in the ass of the snob." So he's picked all sorts of directors from the past and the present, and he's got a fan of Richard Franklin, the late Richard Franklin. He's followed Australian films, and he just loves cinema, and he loves anyone who cares as much about filmmaking as he does, and he's well, most of us, directors are obsessed. That's the only way we can continue for 50 years.
He's launching a new podcast, so you'll need to give him a subtle, not so subtle poke that you want to guest on it. But speaking of filmmakers and love of history, and anyway, your book is just an absolute delight because it's a treasure trove of so much information. But there's one line in there which I kind of tucked away where you wrote, "You never met a green light you didn't like." And it reminded me of a similar idea I heard expressed by De Palma, where he said he was pushing back on the idea of filmmakers kind of planning their filmography like a symphony. Basically says, if you get a green light, you go, and that's what's next. So as somebody who's got more than 60 directing credits in IMDb, many of which are beloved to this day, to what degree would you advise filmmakers to try and like wrestle with fate and be the master of their own destiny like Quentin? Or is it better to kind of bend like a reed in the wind and take the opportunities when they arise? Because your book is full of so many different anecdotes of grabbing opportunities as they come along, whether that's with the Leprechaun films or whatever the case might be. So just looking back on this giant filmography now, what would you kind of urge younger filmmakers to do?
Yeah, well, I suppose there are two words of advice overall, which is make friends. And I don't mean suck up to people that you hope you can persuade to give you something. You make friends by delivering the goods. Maybe you help fellow filmmakers in their time of need, and maybe they'll return the favor one day. But that doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you made a contribution, you made a difference, and you learned something from that experience, from working with those other filmmakers, but not in the driving seat. But eventually, the driving seat will become yours, and you have to use your best judgment to make sure that you deliver what you believe the movie should be, or the episode of television, whatever it is, and that you please the people who gave you the opportunity to make it. But obviously, to thine own self be true is important. But on the other hand, don't be an enfant terrible and spit the dummy, because you can't always get creatively what you want or even what you were promised. But sorry, buddy, things change. We ain't got that money anymore. Look, I promised you, visual effects. You'll have to do it with stock footage. Okay, well, that's what I did with Turkey Shoot, and actually, it works very well. So it's funny how things turn out. But no, so make friends, which is, relationships are important in this business, and people have long memories. And you screw up, they're not going to hire you again. And there have been some occasions in my career where, rightly or wrongly, those that could fund the next one, thought, nah, he didn't deliver for us this time. I mean, I wasn't asked back, not seriously, by Trimark after Leprechaun in Space, which they didn't like its sense of humor. They thought it should have much more horror.
But just to toot your horn for a second, Leprechaun 395 had been the highest selling direct-to-video film of 1995. I mean, the track record was there.
Yeah, I had delivered on Night of the Demons 2 for Republic and for the producers, Walter Jostin and Jeff Joffre. And then they got their hands initially on the next two Leprechaun movies, and brought me along because I had delivered the goods. And after number 3, becoming the highest selling direct-to-video, non-studio direct-to-video, that shipped 55,000 units. So that was, at $50 a head is what the wholesaler would have to buy them from Trimark for. So you work that out on a budget that was purportedly no more than $1.4 million. So nobody got hurt there. Somebody actually got a feather in his cap for greenlighting the movie. So I could do no wrong, and naturally you've got to do number 4, and here we'll give you a handsome raise. And then I came in with my idea, as I depict in the book, of Leprechaun in Space. They had talked briefly about space. They thought Leprechaun on Apollo 13, which I pointed, it started as a sort of a Christmas party poster joke for Trimark. And then they looked at it and thought, wait a minute, maybe there's something here. It's Trimark, we have a problem. On the Apollo 13 poster with the leprechaun poking out of the spacecraft. Maybe there's an idea here. And so when it was brought to me, I said, well, this could be fun, right up my alley. I can go full Monty Python on this one.
It seems like you and Warwick Davis got along really well as well.
Oh, yes, we did. So he'd been kept in the shadows in Leprechaun 2 a bit. He thought, I'm sitting for 3 hours in makeup, and then I sit around for 3 hours before I work, because they're doing the other scenes with the actors, the other actors, and I'm lurking in the shadows watching the other actors before I get to do my thing. So anyway, look, he did lots of good things in Leprechaun 2 as well, but he would like to have had more opportunities, and I could see this is a very funny man.
Belongs to me, this gold I smell. Whoever's got it's going to hell. Yeah! I want me shilling.
So we devised a business for him, and I wrote the limericks and the rhymes, and he had fun with them, and it worked well. And so we reteamed again for number 4. But as I've depicted the pitch sequence of the let's say the leprechaun in the man's pants concept as the variant on the alien chest burster scene, and the Trimark bought it. But in the end, and I can see their point, there should have been more shock, horror, gore sequences in it, and a little less sort of that would have allowed the degree of sci-fi, classic sci-fi parody references to slide by the fans who basically they want kill. Anyway, so I can list that as that could be regarded as a career mistake, because I was not invited. I was loosely invited to do Leprechaun in the Hood, but I thought it really should be done by a black director and not a middle-aged white guy. And then it was clear later that whoever asked me should not have asked me. because no, we don't want him because he'll only make it funny. But in the end, the two Leprechaun in the Hoods were funny because how can you do anything else with that material?
Exactly.
What about the fact that, by this point in your career and going forward?
I interrupt for one moment.
Yes,
and of course, when they make Leprechaun Origins and they want to make it nasty and make him threatening, nobody was that interested. Nobody came, So, I think it was right. Anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's right. I was just wondering, for a lot of other directors like Jonathan Demme, James Cameron, exploitation was a vehicle to get to their bigger, more mainstream projects. And you seem to have stayed on this exploitation track. Was this by design, or was it coming back to James's point about I never saw a green light I didn't like? Was it more that the opportunity was there so you'd go for it, or was it more of a design thing?
Well, it was not a design thing. Obviously, I wanted to make, the son of Spartacus, or Ben-Hur, 2. The return to the chariot race. And so many other films. I wanted to make Hitchcock movies. I wanted to make big World War II movies. I wanted to make James Bond movies, and so on. I'm a big screen guy, trapped in a small screen budget, but that's okay. There are worse traps. Because if you really enjoy what you do, it doesn't matter whether you're playing with an 8mm camera or a 70mm camera. So I started 8mm when I was 15.
Also, you have films like The Siege of Fibres Gloria that give that big budget experience. I don't know what the budget was. I didn't check. I just watched it. I mean, that's jaw-dropping that you could generate that level of production value on that budget. But yeah, I watched it the other day per a recommendation of a friend of mine, David Lambert, and he's like, look, it's got the guy from Full Metal Jacket and it's Brian Trenchard-Smith doing a Vietnam film. It's like, that sounds fucking amazing. I'm gonna try. I've got to watch that. And so I saw it for the first time. So I think you got to make your epics, even if you had to cut some corners to get there.
Yes, I just would have liked to have made more films that allowed more than a 12, 15, 18, or 20-day schedule. But some of my 20-day movies are not too bad. I mean, Happy Face Murders, 21 days. That's a film that I'm quite proud of, and it's quite different for me. And well, what is different? I mean, I'm like the illustrated man. There's a movie in every corner of me, and it's of any genre you wish.
Like Howard Hawks was a genre hopper, Jack Hill was a genre hopper, John Carpenter a genre hopper. You're one of those classic genre hoppers who's made great movies in so many different genres, and that's what makes your filmography so exciting to revisit.
We love cinema as a whole, and that's the important thing.
Well, speaking of which, before we run out of time, speaking of loving cinema, on your site, you had a recent blog post about Mamba, the world's first gory talkie, 1929 all color film. I have not seen it yet. I read your article on it, and I loved your some of the copy that you cooked up for the film. But it reminded me a little bit of like Todd Browning's West of Zanzibar, some of these really wild, irreverent, late 20s outlandish movies. Are you going to do more podcasts or YouTube videos, or more just writing on film history like this? Because as a junkie for old movies from the 20s and 30s, you were preaching to the converted with that post.
Well, I really appreciate that, and please share it to others of your similar persuasion. I don't know how far my website actually reaches, because I don't actually invite comments, because I don't think I want to spend the time writing back to people all the time. I'd rather spend time writing something new. Mamba interested me. It came to me from an Australian, movie buff. It's Paul Brennan. Do you know him? He was a he owned theaters. He owned I think he owned Mike Walsh's theaters and ran Mike Walsh's theaters. Anyway, he's a real cinema buff, and he discovered the only existing print of Mamba that a retired projectionist had kept, had rescued from a warehouse that was about to be demolished. And it was the only complete 35 millimeter positive print with matching Vitaphone vinyl soundtracks.
Wow.
One per reel. And these, were just been gathering dust since 1930 and was about to go into a tip. And this projectionist who'd kept a projector, he'd collected films that he heard of when cinemas were being pulled down, and got in touch with Paul, and everything went from there. And you hear the story of the restoration after that. That you'll hear the story of the restoration in my blog on my website. But as a result of my blog, Kino Lorber have approached me to do the to do a commentary throughout the film.
Fantastic.
Which I will do, and I may do a little piece talking about Tiffany Productions, which made the independent company that made Mamba. And Tiffany was one of those, companies that basically came from nothing and got hung around for 13 years before they finally went broke. And this was their last gasp, their last attempt to get to break into the major studio area. And if it hadn't been for the Depression, which took at least a quarter of cinema attendance money off the plate in 1930, and then worse in 31. So the story of Mamba is interesting, and I'm glad that you liked it. And I will enjoy talking about it some more. So I may do some more cinema historian stuff. I also have projects of my own, but generally when you reach 75, you're considered to be past your use-by date.
Although Ridley Scott's in his 80s still making movies, and Clint Eastwood's in his 90s making movies, and Paul Verhoeven is, I think, getting close to 80 still making movies. So your peers are still active. So
I know, but I don't think I would be regarded as in their league. They have a spotless track record, or fairly spotless, but I'm just considered to be someone who professionally gets the job done, but have a small cult following, let's say, that gets my sense of humor and my approach to subject matter. So it's interesting that there are about 15 of my films mainly from the American period, but my last film, Drive Hard, with Thomas Jane and John Cusack, is among them. And they're all on Tubi now in America, playing with ads. Yes, residuals. What about that? Yes, wonder what. Anyway, because they're free with ads, but somebody's paid something for them.
Exactly.
Anyway, but the main thing is, the more important thing is that they're there for people to see. And that's what any artist wants. He wants his work to be seen. It's nice to be paid for it. And thank God for the DGA, and thank God for what the Australian Directors Guild is trying to do for its directors. Because, we should continue to get, a piece of the pie for, the copyright that we as directors alongside the writers, create. We're different from the producers. We actually, something pours out of here, and same with the writer. Without the writer, there is no story to be made. Without the director, there is not a sort of unique personal vision that can be put upon that story, and hopefully, be the right vision and correctly align with the values of that story. I'm kind of subscribe more to the auteur theory than obviously was prevalent in American television. And when I worked in American television, you knew that it was the showrunner's vision. But every now and again, the showrunner, if you came up with an idea or a shot that took them by surprise, oh, we've been shooting this set for 3 months and you came up with that angle. Ooh, interesting. Better watch this guy. But don't let him go too far. So there are ways to enjoy yourself in American television. But here again, I wish I could have done some of the streaming shows that I've been watching for the last sort of 5 or 6 years.
Any plans to restore any more of your movies? Like Stunt Rock just got the Blu-ray treatment. Death Cheaters is now getting it. Any plans to clean up and re-release any of your earlier films in the near future?
Well, I think, Kung Fu Killers and Danger Freaks.
What about The Love Epidemic?
Well, you see, my wife is roaring with laughter. Yes. Anyway, you should meet my wife. Actually.
I've been watching her in your movies the last couple of days.
Yeah. Well, she's probably too modest to put in an appearance.
I was watching her.
I've got
down the machine gun just last night.
Oh yeah, you saw her. Yes, she wields a good machine gun.
She does indeed.
Yeah, she was. I think she was secretary of the local Baha'i Spiritual Assembly at the time. She machine gunned those guys. Anyway, she's a very religious and spiritual person, but she sure can handle an automatic.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I love her, and she's put the automatic away now. But yeah, it was fun, and I actually kind of forget what your question was.
Just any future plans to restore any more of your older films to kind of help them find a new audience?
Yeah, I think pretty much everything now is available for anyone that interested. I mean, there was an initial DVD which had 6 of my films on it because they believed, well, nobody will buy this unless it's volume.
Value for money.
Yeah, never mind the quality field of it, but happily, there was such a response to that one that they're now bringing out what I think the appropriate ones to bring out for Blu-ray are. I mean, you can find Hospitals Don't Burn Down on YouTube. It was on one of the DVDs, and who knows, some more of my work may get recycled in different packages. I'm encouraging Umbrella Entertainment to take a look at some of these films that are on Tubi, because I think there are a couple of them that people who want to collect my work and have done so far would also want. I mean, they should. I think they would enjoy Britannic. I think they would, which is my sort of Titanic on $3 million. Or as I put it to James Cameron when I met him at a DGA screening, I said, I made Britannic on your catering budget. And after initial shock, he kind of gave me a wry smile and said, there was some quite good CG in that. And then he walked on. Anyway, I'm an admirer of Cameron. Look, he's a dynamic, vigorous, director on the screen, and he is never dull, But yeah, Britannic, Sahara, my remake of the Bogey film with James Belushi in the lead, that's worthy. Similarly, a film I made for Channel 9 Australia in conjunction with Carlton America called Seconds to Spare. I think it went out on DVD as Operation Wolverine, Seconds to Spare. And it's basically died on a train, and which was, what was that Seagal movie?
Under Siege 2, is that the one on the train?
So Under Siege 2 was basically Die Hard on the train, and so Seconds to Spare was Die Hard on the train, again with much less money. But I think we had some fun with it, and I think you could put a couple of my films together as double bills, as if they were drive-in movies. And this is a drive-in double bill.
Speaking of drive-ins, Dead End Drive-In, is that on Blu-ray?
Yeah. Welcome to your future, like it or not. Dead End Drive-In.
Yes, Arrow put it out on Blu-ray.
Beautiful.
In the UK, and the rights are sort of, I don't control the rights, but people like to play it, and it turns up in midnight screenings and so forth. And recently, it's more and more people have been. I think it's on a few streaming platforms as well. But the Blu-ray is beautifully restored from the into positive, and looks pretty damn good. There's only one shot in it that's misframed, because I think they did a correction when they made the anamorphic into negative from the spherical into positive, whereby cropping top and bottom, creating a cinemascope 235 frame, and then squeezing it into the 35mm frame that goes through the projector and is unsqueezed by the lens on the projector. But they made one little mistake when they selected the framing for the shot where there are chickens feeding in foreground and the big truck goes over, and you think, is he going to run over a chicken? Really? Oh, I mean, saw a turkey shoot. Well, would he really? No. Chicken, I knew the chicken would get out of the way, but the chicken didn't get out of the way. The chicken went on pecking the seed because, I'm hungry, and the truck just goes right over the chicken. It's a lovely shot, but they didn't frame it quite right. It just needed, they should have tilted it, tilted the mask down, because then you see the chicken's feet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
can you tell us about the Blu-ray version of Stunt Rock that's coming out? I'd be interested to hear what's included in that and how it's been restored as well.
Well, I brought the original negative and the color reversal into negative, and the mono magnetic to Australia, and initially lodged it with the NFSA, and then when they were short of storage space, which they seem to be, because I think they're trying to get rid of lots of stuff now, which is pity. But I gave it to Umbrella to look after in the meantime. So it is coming from pristine original elements.
Wow.
And will look better than anyone has ever seen it before.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is not in stereo. As I made it in 4-track magnetic, but those elements have been lost.
Yeah, there are all those disastrous early screenings that you talk about in your book, where just everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and a lot of times it had to deal with the soundtrack, and somebody tried to clean the film, and that created all this horrible crackle for some of those early screenings. But it's not, some of the problems with the film go back decades.
Yeah, but it did have a wonderful 4-track magnetic soundtrack, which we played in the Hollywood, motion picture Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Theatre, 800 seats, to a full crowd of young people in front of a potential distributor who immediately bought the film. And it played in good deafening stereo. And of course, the people behind the Dutch premiere, they couldn't get one of the theaters that had 4-track mag. It was playing a more important movie that was making lots of money.
And there's some screening where they played it slightly faster, which made everybody have like chipmunk voices. I mean, it's just like a comedy of errors.
Oh yeah, I mean, because everyone's got their own little territory they worry about. You see, and I worry about, is the film going to look good and sound good for all these buyers who've come to see it, and we've got them nicely drunk. And now all we just need is they want them to like the movie. And firstly, we're starting it too late. And secondly, because we're starting it too late, there's an overtime issue with the theater, you see, and they have to pay someone an extra half hour or an hour to lock up the theater when all these people get out. And no one was authorized to do that. And you see, you can't proceed without authorization. I'm just the manager. No one's told me that this will be paid for, and I'll be responsible. And anyways, what do you do? So their method of getting out quickly anyway, which they didn't tell me about, because I would have said, "Don't you dare do that," was to instead of running the film at 24 frames per second, they ran it at 26. And maybe more, because at times, I wouldn't say Grant Page sounded like a chipmunk, but those gutsy tones of his normal voice were just not the same. And so anyway, these things happen. Look, Murphy's Law, and remember O'Toole's corollary to Murphy's Law. Murphy was an optimist.
That's a great place to end. Paul, any final questions for the great Brian Trenchard-Smith before we bring this in for a landing?
I don't have a big question, but I do just want to say that basically Frog Dreaming, which James would know as The Quest, and BMX Bandits was such a big part of my childhood growing up in Melbourne. Playing all the time, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for that, because I actually discovered the rest of your career retrospectively. So I started with the kids stuff, and then I went back to Man from Hong Kong and loved it all.
Oh yeah, most people did. I mean, thanks to Mark Hartley's documentary, Not Quite Hollywood, people thought, really, he's made those films? I didn't know about those, because these were not, what the glitterati and the arts culture elite considered to be, worthy of, I mean, these were just kids' films, and sure, well-meaning kids' films, but those kids' films, and somehow not the same skill and thought goes into making a kids' film or an adult film. I don't quite buy that, but anyway, it's kids' films don't necessarily catapult you to the next platform in potential in your career. But I'm very glad I made them, and I did 3 episodes of 5 Mile Creek, Stagecoach meets Little House on the Prairie for the Disney Channel. I thoroughly enjoyed those. I like working with kids. I like working with horses. Horses, of course, are an example of Murphy's Law, because they would get tense and nervous when we're all gearing up to shoot, and frequently when the AD shouted "turnover" and the cameras would roll, horses would start pissing and shitting and then we would suddenly cut. We should have sort of got them to do that before, so people run in with spades, stand over it, okay, ready to roll, and then the stagecoach is ready to sort of canter in, and horses are coming out of the stable, and all stop, okay. And so anyway, a little digress. More information you probably needed, and I hope your listeners are not eating. But
see if I can find an appropriate clip to match with that description.
Yes.
Filmmaking is full of human comedy and animal comedy too. Done a lot with animals, but that's for another story, I think.
Well, you can come back and tell any story anytime, and I just wish you the best of luck with your film writing. Whether your future endeavors are shooting or writing or whatever, or a combination of the two. You've given the two of us a lot of joy over the years with all your films, and I just hope that this episode helps more people discover your work. So thank you for just everything you've given to the art of film. It's been an incredible career. So it was an honor to speak to you today.
Well, thank you for your excellent taste. I really appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.